We roll on with our WVU Football 2025 position preview series as today we take a look at the tight ends. Let's talk about them. What's going on, Mountaineer Nation? Welcome back into the Country Roads webcast as we get set to continue our position preview series heading into the 2025 season. Approaching rapidly now. We're getting close to the start of fall camp. It's almost here, guys. We've almost made it. Super excited and really enjoying breaking down this roster on the way there. Today, we're going to talk about this tight end group. Got some talented tight ends on this roster. And yes, Coach Rodriguez will use multiple tight ends in this offense, kind of a change from days of yore. If you look at the time at Jackson State, they had 2 tight ends on the field at times, sometimes even 3 tight ends on the field at times. So we're definitely going to utilize these guys, and we brought in some really talented ones that we're going to talk about here in this video. But before we get to them, just want to hit you guys with a quick reminder. If you would take a second, hit that thumbs up button. It helps us out with that crazy YouTube algorithm, helps us find more Mountaineer football fans like yourself. And if you're one of those that hasn't yet, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Stay up to date on all things WVU football, roster news, recruiting news, transfer portal news, and of course game previews and recaps throughout the season as we inch closer to that as well. You're going to want to take all that in, so be sure to hit that subscribe button, get these videos put directly into your feed. But with that being said, let's take a look at the tight end position group as a whole heading into the 2025 season. And to do that, we will of course use our CRW roster tracker, which you guys are familiar with from our roster update videos here on the channel. But this is the tight end position group heading into the 2025 season. We got 6 bodies here. Some new faces after we do have some departures, of course, with Cole Taylor graduating. Then, of course, you had Jackson Marco transfer to Alabama. You had Johnny Pascuzzi transfer out, Jackson Acquardi transfer out, among some others. But we brought in some other transfers post-spring as well that we have to talk about here within this position group. I think there's a good bit of talent here. I think there's some guys that are familiar with Coach Rod's scheme when you bring over a guy from Jack State and Jacob Barrett. And I think, Grayson Barnes, in my opinion, is probably the transfer that's not being talked about that should be being talked about the most, because he's a really talented receiving tight end that we're bringing in. But I don't want to, tease too much here before we dive into talking about these guys individually. So let's do just that. We'll go in descending order from class ranking, starting with redshirt senior all the way down to redshirt freshman there. So first up, let's talk Greg Genro. All right, so I think with Greg Genro, what stands out is obviously his size. He's got that frame that you like there, especially in a receiving tight end. Hopefully he can add something in the blocking game as well. If so, he's going to find his way onto the field. We thought he would last season, but maybe needed a little bit more time to develop. There was extremely high-rated JUCO tight end coming out there out of Dodge City Community College, but you love the frame at 6'6", 230. And he's a redshirt senior, so if he's going to get on the field, he's going to get on the field this season, and I hope to see him be able to do so. And like I said, with West Virginia likely to employ multiple tight ends, I think we could see it happen. But with Greg Genro, we're talking about somebody that was a junior college All-American first-team tight end. I believe he was rated as the number 1 JUCO tight end in the country as a recruit coming out when we got him to commit to WVU a couple of years ago. He there at Dodge City, 16 catches, 173 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So he made plays in the passing game, and obviously, they wouldn't have kept him on the field as much as he did if he couldn't block as well, which he will be required to do in this scheme. And I think when I look at the names on the roster outside of the aforementioned Grayson Barnes, who we'll talk about momentarily, he could potentially be the other, best receiving threat out of the tight ends here when we go over these 6 names. But I was excited about Greg Genro when we got him out of JUCO, and I'm excited for him this upcoming season because I think this could be the year we finally get to see him get on the field, get some snaps, and hopefully make some plays for the Mountaineers. All right, next up, let's talk about that Jack State transfer that I teased a little bit there when we were taking a look at the position group, and that's Jacob Barrett, 6'3", 231 pounds. What's exciting here, yet again, is it's a Martinsburg native originally, so it's another guy that's getting to come home to West Virginia to play out his final season of collegiate eligibility. We talked about some guys like that when we were previewing the receivers, and we have one here at the tight end position as well, Jacob Barrett. So it's going to mean a lot to him to show out for his home state school here at WVU. And what really interests me here about Jacob Barrett, not to say that he can't make some plays in the pass-catching game, but really when you watch Jack State, you turn on their tape from last season, you see them near the goal line. You see them breaking off big plays in the run game. Like I said, you'll see multiple tight ends used, but it seemed like a lot of the time, a lot of those runs were following behind Jacob Barrett. Seemed to be a really key cog in the run blocking game there at Jack State. I think that's why he follows Coach Rodriguez here to WVU. Coach Rodriguez knows what he has with him. He knows the system. He can help, lead these great backs West Virginia has, as we've talked about that loaded running back room, as he was primarily a blocker at Jack State, but he did have 6 catches for 70 yards over his time there last season. So I think he's going to be someone you see on the field a ton this year. How many passes will he catch remains to be seen, but he's going to be a key cog in this offense, even if you don't see him getting the ball in his hands. You see runs getting sprung. I would not be surprised to see Jacob Barrett having a hand in those. So watch for 81 clearing lanes in the run game this upcoming season for WVU as Jacob Barrett comes in from Jack State, West Virginia native, finishing his final year of his collegiate career at WVU. Which brings us to the name that you need to know if you don't know already, Grayson Barnes. 6'4", 222 pounds, senior season, and man, was he impressive during his time at Northern Illinois. I mean, we look at what West Virginia lost with Cole Taylor, right? And Cole Taylor, the past couple of seasons racked up more receptions than we've seen a tight end, rack up at WVU in quite some time. But I think when you look at Grayson Barnes coming in, he is a little bit ahead of where Cole Taylor was when he came into WVU. Cole Taylor was a kind of a more reserve role at LSU, hadn't played a ton. With Grayson Barnes, you're getting someone that played a lot on, at Northern Illinois and was even second on their team in receptions. He was kind of a go-to player in their receiving game. If you haven't seen it, there's some great clips of him making impressive catches, including an really, phenomenal one-handed grab that really made waves when we first got a commitment from him. So I'm really excited to see what they do with Grayson Barnes because, like I said at the top of the video here, Rich Rod's offense has never really been known to, throw it to the tight end a ton, but I think that could change when you got a rep in the receiving game like Grayson Barnes, who is super athletic, super quick for a tight end as well. He's almost like having an extra receiver out there, which is going to be great for the system that we run, right? Because one thing that we know we're going to do is we're going to spot the ball, right? Maybe we're going to be using that up-tempo style, going as fast as possible. And while we're doing that, that means if Grayson Barnes is on the field in a tight end role, maybe he's lined up attached, we go no huddle, we want to go to 4 wides. Grayson Barnes can easily split out there, get in the slot, and line up as a slot receiver on some plays, and then that might create a mismatch for you against a slot corner, an undersized linebacker, a slower linebacker. So I think Grayson Barnes is going to have opportunities in this offense to make plays at WVU. Would not be surprised to see him make a ton this season. I'm super excited about this pickup. Like I said, to me, maybe one of the most underrated transfers that we picked up because I think he's one of the best that people aren't talking a ton about. You look at his time there at Northern Illinois last season, 31 catches, and led the team with 4 touchdown catches. So he was the receiving touchdown leader at Northern Illinois, averaged nearly 11 yards per catch and had over 300 receiving yards, caught a pass in every single game there at Northern Illinois. So you love that right there. Just looking at him, when you watch his highlights, they're even more impressive. So I cannot wait to see how Rich Rod and company utilize Grayson Barnes in this offense, but I think he's going to be a key piece this upcoming season for the Mountaineers. And then let's go to former walk-on, another Morgantown native, a hometown kid, played at university in Colin McBroom, who seems like he's been all over throughout his, 3 or 4 years here at WVU, right? I mean, he was kind of a fullback type, but he also, we'd seen him receive carries as a running back early, in the Neil Brown tenure there. When he first came to campus, we seen him get carries in the spring game and such. So I was kind of wondering where he would fit in the Rich Rod scheme. Kind of all of our fullbacks are now just titled as tight ends, so I think that's why you see him now as a tight end. Not the height that the other tight ends have. He's only 6 foot, but he is 235 pounds. But I do think that he is physical enough and has that hard edge mentality enough to potentially, if he's called upon, help out in the blocking game as a blocking tight end for sure. We know he's athletic. He's been used in the run game before. So, we're super excited to have, a state native here getting to play for the Mountaineers, and someone that's stuck around for as long as he has is super impressive. And, it's not all about football. He's really good academically as well. All Big 12 conference, first team, all academic. And I think each of his first couple of seasons there, if I'm not mistaken, he did appear in 3 games last season and has been a scout team champion multiple times for WVU in the past. So if nothing else, if he doesn't carve out a role and get on the field to help with blocking at times, maybe if West Virginia goes super heavy, he's one of those extra guys that comes on there. Or maybe if they want to line somebody up in the backfield as a lead block, maybe he's a candidate for that. But if nothing else, he's going to give you some great looks on scout team, be a great body for you to have on the team. And he's a great teammate. So we love Colin McBroom on the roster, now listed as a tight end. All right, and then we come to a WVU legacy player, right? Noah Braham. Of course, his dad was Rich Braham, went from a walk-on to an All-American player under Don Nealon, and then, of course, is in the WVU Sports Hall of Fame now, one of the, more highly recognized offensive linemen that WVU ever has. So Noah Braham certainly has the pedigree, and it looks like he has the size as well. 6'3", 243 pounds, and I definitely could see him carving out a role in the West Virginia offense if they go multiple tight ends. This is someone that could come in and rock some heads for sure as a blocker when you think about what his dad did as an offensive lineman. And I'm happy to see him on this team because if you guys remember when we were doing our transfer updates, he was one that hit the portal, looked like he was going to leave for a second, but then decided to stay at WVU, came back on the roster. Talked about that in another roster update. Over the summer. So happy to have Noah Braham, the legacy player, back on the roster. And yet again, make it two tight ends here that we're talking about, both from University High School, as Noah Braham hails from there as well. Of course, a Morgantown native. Did see action in a couple of games last year, I think against UCF and Texas Tech, but had, not a ton of action over his first couple of years. Of course, redshirted that first year, and then last year played sparingly. So he is going to be a redshirt sophomore, but I think now and moving on is when you're going to start to see him hopefully carve out a role for himself. He's got, the frame up. He's got, like I said, the pedigree, and now he's got the experience. We'll see how long it takes him to get on the field. There are some guys that are upperclassmen ahead of him, but I think if he's one that decides to stick around, he'll be a key cog throughout this, Rich Rod 2.0 era, whether it's more this year or more in the future. I would not be surprised to see Noah Braham on the field as a Mountaineer, making plays and opening up holes in the run game there as a tight end here on this offense. And then last, but certainly not least, one of the transfers that West Virginia added post-spring was Ryan Ward, who is a redshirt freshman, was previously at UNC, redshirted last season, but look at the size there, 6'4", 243 pounds. You got a really high ceiling here on Ryan Ward, someone with a ton of potential. That's why he was actually rated as the number 7 tight end in the transfer portal, according to 247, when he decided to leave UNC, because he is someone that had a ton of potential. He was a top 100 tight end in the country coming out. He was a top 40 player in the state of New Jersey as a recruit. Like I said, went to UNC last year, did get on the field for those 4 games, but where you have that 4-game redshirt rule, was still able to redshirt. So that's why he's going to be a redshirt freshman for the Mountaineers this upcoming season. And we'll talk more about this when we talk projected pecking order. But even though he's young, I would not rule him out as being one of those, top 3 tight ends. I think he's certainly going to battle. I think it's going to be interesting to see who are the tight ends that are most utilized. I think we know at least one of them, or at least I personally have a feeling about one of them, and I'm sure you can guess on who that is. Grayson Barnes. But I think that the other jobs are kind of open, because West Virginia's probably going to utilize multiple tight ends. I think we have multiple guys that could be very good as blockers. We talked about Noah Braham having that type of role. We've talked about Jacob Barrett having that role. But Ryan Ward, I think, could as well. When you look at his frame, 6'4", 243 pounds, and you really love the potential of this one. As like I said, as you always kind of got to preface this, if you can keep him around, he can be an absolute stud for you throughout his career here at WVU. So we're really excited to pick up Ryan Ward, which there's the 6 bodies in the room, but how do I think that this will shake out as far as pecking order? Let's talk about it. All right, so projected pecking order for me at the tight end position, this is the way I see it. Grayson Barnes, tight end number 1, but that's if you're using more of a receiving tight end. Not to say that he can't block as well. Grayson Barnes can hold his own. But I think if you're going, primary blocking tight end, it's probably Jacob Barrett. So I think, between Grayson Barnes as your number 1 receiving option and Jacob Barrett as your number 1 blocking option, those are probably going to be the 2 tight ends you see most this season. Then I think beyond that, you got multiple candidates, because I would say that probably Greg Genro is your next best receiving tight end. He's a redshirt senior. It's his last opportunity to get on the field. So you've got to think he's going to get some snaps this season. But then the next in line for the blocking tight end is where I get a little curious, because I think you could look at Noah Braham or Ryan Ward. No offense to Colin McBroom. I just think Braham or Ward will see the field before he does. But, I could be wrong there. I definitely think Colin McBroom probably be used on special teams as well, potentially. But I think, to break it down, your top receiving tight ends, I think Grayson Barnes, and then, another receiving tight end behind him would probably be Greg Genro. And then if you're talking your top blockers, Jacob Barrett's going to be the one you see the most. And then it'll either be Noah Braham or Ryan Ward behind him if you're going pure blockers into the game. But I think all in all, the 2 tight ends you'll see the most this season, far and away to me, Grayson Barnes and Jacob Barrett. And I think they're both going to be really good players for West Virginia. And honestly, I think this is a pretty good tight end room heading into 2025. But That's just my opinion. Would love to hear yours. Drop it in the comments down below. We appreciate those interactions as we continue to try and grow the CRW community throughout Mountaineer Nation. Be on the lookout for our next position preview video, which will hit the offensive line, and that'll wrap us up on the offensive side, and then we can flip over and talk about the defense. But I appreciate you guys tuning into these as they continue to drop. And until next time, let's go Mountaineers.